I'm Dave Armlin, VP of Customer Success and Solutions Architecture at Chaos Search, and I'm happy to be here today on the Data Legends podcast with Kevin Petrie, Vice President of Research at Eckerson Group. Kevin, thanks for being with us today.
Dave, I really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, in your expertise, you've certainly been in the business for a long time, solving big problems with data at scale, and that's really the core focus of this podcast. Would you mind sharing a little bit of background on the types of things that you're doing, and maybe some of the big challenges that you've solved recently, and the use cases that have come to bear, and the tools that you've brought to bear?
Sure. So just quickly, in terms of my background, I've been in tech for 25, almost 30 years, amazingly. And most recently, I run research here at Eckerson Group, Research and Advisory Services. My background includes a stint at EMC Global Services, where I ran a team of analytics services solutions architects in EMEA and also in the Americas. And through that, got a really good hands-on view of how you actually make these things connect and deliver on promises to customers. But really pleased to have the opportunity to share today some of the enterprise trends and pain points that we're looking at here at Eckerson Group. I think the three biggest areas, sort of mega trends that we're focused on and that our consulting clients are focused on are, one, trying to figure out how to handle this emerging paradigm called the cloud data platform, how to bring together data, manage it, analyze it in an increasingly cloud-oriented context. So this effectively merges the data lake and the data warehouse. I think that's a trend that most organizations are heading towards, with halting progress in some areas, but it's certainly a major focus, and it's worth the effort for most enterprises. Another area that I've been looking at is observability. There are a lot of different flavors of that. You could have business observability that studies all kinds of KPIs and how they correlate to each other. Some of the most interesting areas are focused on operations observability, essentially the next generation of application performance management, and then data observability, which looks at data quality, looks at data pipelines, and how to make sure that data is being delivered effectively and with high quality to different consumers. The third megatrend is really machine learning, which is the most popular subset of artificial intelligence. More and more enterprises are getting serious with pilot projects or even production projects where they're putting to work one, or in many cases, dozens of machine learning models to start to find patterns in data and automate recommendations or even actions to take advantage of that data.
Super. Well, it sounds like you guys are involved in a lot of really exciting things that are happening out there. As you look at cloud data platforms, how are you? Is this an evolution of you said data warehouse, et cetera? Are you coming in to help your customers that you're consulting with, come up with a long-term strategy, or are there projects that are already rolling that you kind of come in to help carry through? How are you attacking that problem?
Yeah, most organizations have had heritage data warehouses for decades, depending on how old they are as an enterprise. Typically, they're monolithic systems on premises, and they're in some stage of figuring out how to move that data, or at least spin up new workloads and projects on elastic cloud platforms that rely on cloud-based object storage. So a lot of the organizations we work with know that's the destination. They might have already started a migration there, but they really want a data strategy to try to figure out how to make the most of that data modernization effort. It's tricky because the old stuff on-prem never quite goes away. So there are a lot of linkages you need to manage back to your on-premise system. A lot of organizations have persistent silos in their different business units. And part of the effort with data modernization is to break down those silos and try to standardize on fewer, ideally one, version of the truth, ideally based in the cloud. So we help organizations put together strategies to bring together the different stakeholders on that common source of truth, which increasingly will rely on a cloud native object store.
Awesome. Well, as you know, Chaos Search loves that because our whole world is really understanding that cloud object storage is foundational, and our technology allows you to quickly gain insights into that data that you've stored in cloud object storage. This show's not necessarily specifically about Chaos Search, though, so we're happy to hear that you're seeing those trends as you help customers, your customers, create a strategy around customer data platform. Are you hitting multiple clouds, or are customers going hybrid as they think about the migration from on-prem and into the cloud?
It's interesting. I think that most organizations recognize that some version of hybrid is going to be the norm for the foreseeable future, because a few realities of Fortune 2000 enterprise environments is that you've got data gravity, which is this notion that where your data lives, you tend to have a lot of applications and other things start to cluster around that. So it's hard to move entirely, rip and replace, and move everything to the cloud. Another trend is sovereignty requirements. So in certain geographies, you really need to keep the data in place and avoid pushing it across national boundaries. Those are two trends, plus the complexity of migration, the cost of migration. So all that's to say, you've got these hybrid environments that need to straddle the on-premises repositories, but then the cloud repositories as well. With that said, there are some really interesting dynamics, and the more you can optimize on the cloud platforms with the Cloud Native Object Store as your core repository, the better. The common construct is you're merging the best of the data lake, which is the Cloud Native Object Store. It's the support for this incredibly rich data science ecosystem to apply models to multi-structured data in the object store. And then you're also bringing in the best of the data warehouse, which is SQL structures, SQL query capabilities, the ability to handle tabular data in a very governed way. So if you can bring that together into a common cloud data platform, some folks call it a lakehouse, some folks call it a cloud data warehouse. I think looking at a lot of the big trends in this space, everyone's converging from different directions onto that destination.
Oh, great. Well, we certainly are seeing those trends as well. And, we're happy to see people moving data from on-prem into any of the cloud object storage solutions that are out there. Now, in terms of the types of tools that you're using, are you using the native cloud services, or are you agnostic in your approach to this? How do you handle, some of the products that come to bear?
Yeah, well, I can sort of address it from, on the one side, what we advise our consulting clients, and then the other hand, from the research perspective, what we see as trends in terms of enterprise adoption. I think that there's clearly a push to. I apologize. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. So I was really just wondering, what types of tools are you bringing to bear as you help customers,
Right, okay.
Move to the cloud? And I know you certainly have your consulting practice and then your research group. So how do the trends versus what you're seeing customers use align, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's some really interesting the common platform, as I said. You've got Databricks, you've got Snowflake, you've got Dremio, you've got Chaos Search, you've got a lot of different organizations that are offering a relatively consistent approach of putting organizational structures, efficient query methods on top of object storage. Understand that there are different approaches across those, but most organizations are starting to adopt platforms like that, and then they're adopting as well increasingly software as a service and cloud native applications that can run on top of those platforms, because there's clearly a convergence of data and operational workloads. So we see a lot of organizations looking to standardize on cloud native applications that will start to embed analytics functionality into their operational tasks that'll start to really be data-driven applications. So there are a lot of developer tools associated with that as well. we see a huge uptake looking at tools in this ecosystem of data science capabilities. And I think everyone agrees that from a platform perspective, you have to support the full suite of capabilities there. These would include workflow tools like Apache Airflow. These would include data pipeline tools like Aqualing or others, Fivetran. These would include notebooks, which Jupyter is a common one, Zeppelin as well. They'll include open source machine learning libraries like PyTorch and scikit-learn. So those are just a few of the different categories of tools that are part of this broad ecosystem with a ton of open source innovation as well as commercial tools that'll help organizations start to bring data together and then build both analytical capabilities on top of it and data-driven applications on top of it.
Great. It sounds like there's a variety of options for folks and certainly a mixture of open source and commercially available tools. You can get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tricky because on the one hand, organizations want to consolidate to the best they can, reduce the number of tools they're working with, reduce the number of platforms. But there's also this proliferation of very rich best-of-breed capabilities out there. So most organizations are trying to strike this balance between, on the one hand, simplicity, which is going with more of a suite approach, and on the other hand, rich capabilities and agility that you get from a best-of-breed set of tools.
Right. Well, certainly, Chaos Search, we are very excited that we unlock a lot of value out of cloud object storage directly. So hopefully collapsing and removing some of the hops of moving data around and doing some of the transformations and that you might do in an ETL tool within Chaos Search and just getting the raw data there. But certainly there's intersection with a lot of the products and tools that you described there a moment ago. And what are the motivations for folks that you're seeing? Is it, unlocking, more value, business value out of their data, or are there, cost drivers? What are the types of things that are driving people to build, cloud data platforms like the ones you described?
Well, we're at a really interesting crossroads right now because we're coming out of, I hope, the COVID pandemic, and that took these digital transformation trends and initiatives that were underway and fast forwarded them about 5 years within the space of months for a lot of organizations. And as a result of that rapid digital transformation, which continues, organizations have created an entirely new digitized ways of engaging customers. They've gotten incredible digital capabilities when it comes to managing and optimizing their operations. So whether it's customer engagement or operations, there's a lot more digital signals out there. There's a ton of data that's created that creates an incredible opportunity to optimize how you go to business, how do you go to market, how you take action, how you make decisions. It also creates an incredible risk, which is that you could end up drowning in your data. So there's never been a bigger time where data is a bigger potential asset or a bigger potential liability.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. I mean,
so the more you can filter this stuff and get it down, it's tricky. And so a lot of companies are just trying to figure out, how do I make sure that I'm taking advantage of my data? Because I know darn well my competitor across the street is, or trying to. So I have to gain competitive advantage.
Definitely. And
I'd say that's the biggest trend. How do you figure out how to generate revenue and reduce cost using data and making sure it's not liability?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you've coined a T-shirt there. It's drown or differentiate yourself. And I think the pandemic was a compelling event. I think Satya Nadella had pointed out that, massive acceleration of digital transformation early on. And, I think there's a lot of benefits that, we were forced to have, as the world shifted to online. So it kind of accelerated what folks probably had wanted to see happen. And it sounds like, you're kind of agreeing that trend there's benefit there, but there's certainly risk that you may drown or you may not be successful in your desires to differentiate your company with how you use data.
Yeah, it's a very interesting time in that regard. And I think a classic microcosm of those trends or example of those trends is what we're seeing with observability. Because the observability is this notion that you've got a ton of signals out there, and you need, a ton of noise, and you need to extract clear signals from it. So a lot of people are moving to the cloud. The cloud, despite all its billing, can actually make things IT harder than ever, because you need to make sure that all these interrelated containerized microservices that are relying on often distributed pieces of cloud infrastructure are running in a way that delights customers fast enough, with enough availability, and they're optimizing the customer experience. But they're orders of magnitude more data that are describing how those things are working together. Containers throw off a lot of data. Load balancers throw off a lot of data. Virtual private networks throw off a lot of data. And so you got to figure out how to master all those logs, all those traces, all those metrics, and make sense of it. So that's where it's actually been very interesting to see what Chaos Search can do in that regard, related to log analytics, to assist that challenge of cloud operations with better observability into those trends, because it's the classic case of you got a huge potential liability, which is drowning in noise, and a huge potential upside and asset in terms of gaining differentiation and figuring out how you can extract signal from the noise.
Yeah, absolutely. We have customers in the ed tech space, and moving education remote caused a factor of an exponential increase in growth for some platforms, that having to see how those systems scale and understand how to weed through all of the noise to understand how companies can find signals that help them improve the customer experience, or marry up data from multiple streams in ways that allows them to improve the experience for the end user and for their businesses. So that definitely is what we're seeing and solving for some of our customers. One thing we're also seeing is that marriage of operational data with business data as well. And maybe you could talk a little about the observability on both sides of the coin there, and either trends or things that you guys are doing.
Yeah,
would I think be interesting to hear.
Trends in terms of how organizations are approaching observability.
Both from operational observability and other facets of observability in their world of data.
Yeah, so what I like most about this observability research I've been doing is that we've identified 5 subdisciplines, and all of them seem to be merging somewhat because they have similar stakeholders that are trying to solve similar problems, and you're starting to see this overlap of tools to do that. So there's business observability, which you could also view as business monitoring, Anadot, Sisu, companies like that are looking across potentially hundreds of business KPIs and metrics and figuring out correlations between them using machine learning models. Then you've got operations observability, which is looking across this blizzard of signals from containers and cloud compute clusters and all this stuff, trying to extract signal from that noise. Those tools are starting to blend a little bit. Then you've got data observability, which would include, as I said, the data quality. So Monte Carlo, companies like that. It would also include data pipeline observability. Companies like Excel Data are great at figuring out pipeline health and also infrastructure health. So pipeline is starting to merge with operations observability, because you've got data-driven applications that are bringing together operations and data analytics workloads. So in all these different ways, these different segments are coming together. And another type of observability is model observability, which is trying to figure out, if you have a machine learning model that's running, is it still emitting predictions that are accurate? Is it still using features that represent reality? Is it still performing at a high level? And so model observability becomes important, and it's very closely related to data quality, as you can appreciate. So those areas are
a lot of convergence there.
But suffice it to say that yeah, definitely. And it's a challenging time for organizations, because they're optimizing on these complex cloud infrastructures. They don't want to buy 5 different tools to address all these different classes. How can they start to standardize on 1 or 2 to solve common problems? That'll be, I think, an interesting challenge for VPs of IT, heads of IT, and chief data officers.
Got
over the
it.
next couple
And
of years.
in terms of trends, are existing companies adding functionality to address some of these issues, or are new companies being born to tackle some of these problems, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, I think a little of both. I think you've got, Chaos Search, as we know, provides some interesting possibilities looking at log analytics in particular, which can help with operational workloads, but in the future that could certainly help with data-oriented workloads as well. You've got companies like Excel Data that will help address model observability, looking at drifting data and how that affects model accuracy. They also address data pipeline observability. And I think that the capabilities of some of these operations observability companies like Chronosphere could also start to address data workloads. So very interesting time where organizations are starting to enhance their tools to address multiple problems.
Got it. Great. Well, yeah, I mean, Chaos Search, we certainly are a data platform, and our first use case, if you will, an API that we supported is the Elasticsearch API, targeted at log and event data. But we're definitely seeing that, that data, we have customers that want to, marry up and correlate data from the log and event telemetry with other types of data, either operational or business data. So we're definitely see that. And as I hear you talk about some of these other use cases, I know that they emit telemetry that I'd love to see what Chaos Search could do with as well. I'm not familiar with model observability, but it sounds pretty exciting. Segueing into that, how are people applying machine learning and seeing success with models that really work? And you don't have to out anyone relative to applications of machine learning that didn't work, but if you have some success stories or just concepts even that where people are seeing success, that'd be interesting. And Chaos Search, we are kind of our you alluded to it a moment ago, we will be providing, SQL access from tools like Looker and Tableau and notebooks, et cetera, into that same wonderful index that allows us to index data, petabyte scale data, and query it from an Elasticsearch API. We'll be providing that from SQL and then eventually from ML APIs. So maybe a little bit of machine learning, success and things that you've seen.
Yeah, so we're at a really interesting crossroads with machine learning right now because the irony is that the thinking machines, the models themselves, are the easy part. You wouldn't expect that, but there's such a rich repository of open source libraries with a rich set of models and starter algorithms, PyTorch, scikit-learn, TensorFlow, are kind of the big three. And so organizations can oftentimes find what they need there once they select an ML technique, but actually applying that to their data, applying the right one to their data, performing the right exploratory data analysis to understand, to clean up their data, to transform it into something understandable that has the right features, and then figuring out how to train the model on their data, an accurate subset of their data, is the tricky part. And then the other tricky part is once you have a model that you think is going to reflect reality with its predictions, how do you put that into place in a way that doesn't take your operations sideways? Because yes, the upside of making cool customer recommendations when someone clicks to buy something on your e-commerce site, if you can convince them to buy something else 1% of the time, that's great. That moves the needle. But if you piss them off 1% of the time, pardon my French, you go sideways fast. So you got to make sure that you're using the model in a responsible way and integrating it with your core operations.
Got it. So you alluded to this whole space of model observability. Is that really an evolution of the humans watching whether you've ticked off a customer and not had negative impact versus positive impact, and automating that with automated monitoring, or am I oversimplifying?
No, I think observability definitely needs to help keep that close eye on the models on a few different dimensions. One is performance. Are they delivering the recommendations or the classifications or the predictions fast enough? Two is, are they making predictions and stuff that fit reality? Three is, are they based on features that still represent reality? And then another one is are you inadvertently showing bias or
Yeah.
operationalizing bias? Or are you mishandling personally identifiable information? So there are a lot of different ways in which you need to observe those models, because all those dynamics will change over time. COVID's another great example. Any model you built in 2009 to predict customer behavior was useless as of April
Right.
of 2020, or within reason, because customers started behaving in very strange ways or unpredicted ways. So it's important to monitor those models and figure out how you can adapt to shifting realities.
Yeah,
and shifting
another big
dynamics.
impact of the pandemic, and people's behaviors are dramatically different now in how they approach certain things. So that's interesting. And I hadn't really thought about some of the ethics that come into play with machine learning relative to inferred or other types of characteristics you might apply to data and to humans that cross some ethical or cause some ethical quandaries. So in addition to bias, of course.
Yeah, it's got implications in terms of enterprise reputation. It has implications just from a user perspective. We don't want to operationalize or put into our business practice anything that shows bias, even inadvertently. And it's likely there'll also be some legislation on that front as well. So that's where you need a model that's not biased, but is also explainable to your customers and to regulators.
As a person who loves automating things, are there any features or things that you can apply to detect whether you're building bias into your models, or things that might be things you want to look at? Are those features that some of the tool set are bringing to bear?
Yeah, so the notion of model observability is becoming a core tenet of a lot of machine learning platforms. And machine learning platforms, I'm actually doing a report on this now, a deep dive into several tools in this category. It's bringing together that full machine learning lifecycle of data and feature engineering, of model development, and then model production, which will include governance and operations. And so observability becomes very important in that production stage. As you can imagine, the key governance challenge is observing all these indicators of bias and other things. And so most of the machine learning platforms are focused on trying to go across the life cycle and also help create sort of this premium factory where you've got multiple models getting trained or standing, kind of in the batter's box at once, while you've got multiple models in production and you're always monitoring them and you're figuring who to put in and who to sub out. All that stuff becomes really important. So within that, observability becomes something where you've got the ability to configure what are your parameters, your thresholds to indicate different drift in accuracy of models, ways in which you might be exhibiting bias. So you could do sort of A/B comparisons of model predictions, holding certain variables constant, but changing one or two other variables. And all this stuff can be automated so that you're performing periodic checks and getting those indications and those findings and kind of centralizing your views of it, maybe in a dashboard, maybe in a model catalog. So that notion of model governance, which includes model observability, is something that's getting put into a lot of these machine learning platforms.
That's great. It sounds like there's a variety of tools that'll, help you kind of tackle those things in an automated way. And, whenever you hear about automation or even machine learning, I know there's a lot of people that are concerned about, replacing humans, if you will. But I'm of the approach or of the opinion that, we're just providing an opportunity for, humans to kind of climb the stack and do things that are more important or higher order value. I hope that that's where we're headed. And it sounds like, the things that you just described about, the observability, in ways that you can automate, your success rates of the model or detect bias. It sounds like that, whether it's dashboards or other mechanisms, humans will be at that layer of the stack to kind of review and see how things are going, to kind of iterate and innovate even faster. So that's exciting.
Yeah, it is. And I definitely agree with you that all the indications so far are, to me, that automation is good for workers because it makes them more productive. And therefore, from an economic perspective, they generate more output per hour, which increases profits and wages. And I think it, like you said, moves us up the stack in terms of the value we can add. Machine learning models, to me, they're kind of they're employees. You need to manage them and you need to keep an eye on them, but they work for you. And if you have a point at which you think the machines are not working for you, the models are not working for you, you got a problem. But they definitely need the human oversight, and so they're key points within any machine learning lifecycle and then operations as well, where a human is applying their judgment and they're managing the system that will start to operationalize different recommendations or
Got it.
actions.
Great. Now, you and I have been doing this a few years, and from my perspective, ML
Yeah.
has been one of those things that, there's been some wonderful applications, recommendations engines. Netflix has certainly helped us find out things we like, and there's a lot of other applications of that. Where do you think we stand in the hype cycle versus, the value, delivery in ML? Are we at a point where we're really starting to kind of hammer home and win, get a lot of benefit from it?
I think so. I think um, straw man poll would show that most enterprises are making very serious investments, and of those, a significant portion are in pilot phase, and of those, a significant portion are in in production. And there are a lot of basic tasks that can be solved through machine learning that helps to make people more productive. We'll probably know a lot more about where we are, say, in 2 years, because it's really right now that organizations are making some of the more serious investments. And it's also now that the what's required of the data scientist is coming down a little bit. Some of the tools that are out there can help you, can look at your data set, help you transform it, and then can actually recommend the algorithm for you. This is AutoML. They can recommend the right machine learning technique and help you select an algorithm to apply to that. So Data Robot is one example that'll help make this whole experience much more intuitive so that you don't need the rocket scientist, PhD data scientist to come in and solve the problem. You might have more of an entry-level data scientist that can handle some of this. So that imbalance, that dearth of data scientist expertise that we had a few years ago, I think is getting better. There are more data scientists, and there's also
Great.
a little
That's
less
great to hear.
required of
And
them.
certainly, throughout your career and mine, it's certainly exciting when, things get less complex and you can solve bigger problems, more easily. And then again, climb the stack
Yeah.
there, even without any machine learning, you're capable of doing more. And certainly at Chaos Search, we are excited to be, solving the problem of data, at petabyte, exabyte scale, in multiple clouds, and allowing people to just bring more data together. And in many cases, you don't even really know what you have. Making that process easier, where you're able to understand and what you have in terms of data, and get value from it, and do so in a disruptive price performance. I think a challenge that a lot of companies have is making hard decisions about how much data can they keep and get value from, because it can get expensive quickly. And certainly, I think, to your point earlier about drowning or differentiating, I think everybody wants to win,
Yeah.
and highlight the value that they bring as an enterprise in a differentiated way, and sometimes that can be expensive. So KS Search, we're solving those problems now, but I think the ones that you're alluding to, relative to easier machine learning and automation there and things like that, we'll be venturing into those phases of the industry, and not in the near future as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Very interesting
absolutely.
times.
In terms of data everywhere, 5G. I know Amazon's got local zones and the ability to bring the Amazon cloud into on-prem. Certainly, Microsoft and Google are doing similar things. Where do you see the cloud vendors going? Are we going back out to the edge hardcore, or is it just going to be more of everything? Or what are your thoughts on the trends there?
Oh, it's really hard to. It's a very interesting concept because organizations. We talked about data gravity and sovereignty and migration costs. That means data in place is going to persist. I think that over time, people will spin up whatever they can that's new on the cloud. So you've got this whole burst of cloud native companies that were born in 2015 or onwards. And there's no reason they shouldn't just start in the cloud. Now, some of them, if they have physically demanding operations that require vigilance at the edge, could build edge repositories as well, or have edge IoT, edge analytics, or edge AI setups. But I think overall the trend will continue to be moving more stuff to the cloud. With that said, there's a very interesting dynamic, which is that the big three cloud platforms, AWS, Azure, and Google, make a ton of money off cloud compute, and that's created some pain now, so that organizations are trying to figure out how to hedge on that front, how to optimize performance, reduce CPU cycles where needed, or even gain some leverage for certain workloads by keeping stuff on premise or going to another service provider, cloud service provider, so they could kind of play providers off against each other. I don't know quite how that's going to pan out. Multi-cloud is tough, but it makes a lot of sense because organizations don't want to put all their eggs in one cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, we're seeing similar trends, but you're right. Multi-cloud can be hard. We definitely, believe in cloud object storage and consistent APIs and the value that people get from that. So we're big supporters, but we're also we benefit from a lot of these battles relative to people logging more, whether it's microservices, serverless, whatever cloud, as a company that's helping people wrangle data, they're going to generate more regardless of where they run it, given the trends in the world. So we're happy to be helping solve those challenges, but I'm with you on some of the complexity of multi-cloud and how to solve if you're a company trying to hedge your bets so you don't have all your eggs in one basket and lose your ability to negotiate.
Yeah, it's very true. I think data volumes will continue to increase. The 3 V's, volume, variety, and velocity.
Absolutely, up and to the right. Well, Kevin, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I'm looking forward to hearing more of your research. Certainly, I know you've done a lot of great things, and I know you've had some great feedback on what we're doing here, and we appreciate that. And looking forward to talking more in the future.
Good. Well, likewise, Dave. Really enjoyed the conversation. We live in very interesting times, and I look forward to the conversation that we might have in a year's time.
Absolutely. Well, until then, good luck with everything. Be well. And thanks again for your time today on the Data Legends podcast.
Sounds good. And likewise, thank you.